Okay. Very nice. I appreciate it. And we'll talk. Okay. All right, we may be recording, but we got another minute before we get official. Are you okay, bud?
No, I got a walking disc.
I got it.
Well, that's no good. What can I do for you?
Nothing, absolutely
Oh, gosh.
nothing.
Okay, I do have 6 o'clock. We're gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Can we get roll call, please?
Kevin Lilly,
I'm here.
April Roderick, Kyle Wade,
I'm here.
Blake Forrest, Ross Levinstein.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. I do have a couple of items I want to add under old business. I did not see on the sales tax project update 512 East Maryland, so I want to make sure we've wrapped that up. But something- something-
That's 712.
712.
712, yeah, okay. And then also our discussion last month on the trucks entering, Silver Creek and just kind of the truck routes and where they're allowed to go in the city of Sherwood, just in general. So I want to add that as well. We'll just put, I guess, for now, truck routes. Is there any other old business that we need to add to the agenda? Any other new business?
Kevin, I just want to add, and we can just talk about it, just I had a constituent call, under new business, I guess, about some no parking signs on Woodridge. About that. Mind?
On Woodridge?
Uh-huh.
Okay, got it. All right, so we'll add that under new business and we'll move forward. So we've got roll call. We do have a quorum, so we have approval of minutes from our April meeting.
Motion to approve.
We've got a motion, we've got a second. Is there any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank y'all very much. Move on to budget. Just really want to do just a quick review here. We've got a couple items that may take some time. So I don't want to spend a lot of time going through things that we've gotten written updates on, but really, I guess, Brian and the mayor's here and Finley's here. I mean, are there any budgetary concerns from your perspective or anyone else who's in the street fund budget?
Out to mine, unless someone has some questions on me, take the line, I'll be glad to answer it.
Okay.
Anyway.
Kyle, Ross, any questions from you guys?
I don't have any.
No.
Okay, so we'll move on then, Public Works update. I believe everyone got an emailed copy of the superintendent's report. Did anybody not get that that's on the committee?
I got it.
Okay, then I would ask here too, any specific questions from committee members here on the Public Works update? Brian, anything specific you want to point out or anything that we need to be brought to special attention on?
No.
Okay. Any other updates as it relates to Public Works that this committee needs to be aware of or address from your perspective?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Street update. So we'll just kind of, on our annual overlay program. I mean, or how are we looking towards?
I've had a couple hours to devote to it this week and hoping to get a little more time tomorrow to work on it. Still working on it.
Okay. So I know we all blinked and here it is. I mean, it's May the 11th. And sometimes those guys need some time to prepare and get stuff going. So what is there, as far as the folks we've used in the past, Cranford, Redstone, those guys, I mean, when are we expecting that they're just going to say, look, I don't have time to do any of that or much of that, or, whatever?
That's a good question. It's getting close. We've got to get down to the nitty gritty and get it out. I know, Roger's group called me a few weeks ago just to make sure we were putting one out, but they was gonna try to leave space open. I think we just gotta get this storm cleaned up, a few things behind us where we can get time devoted to it.
Okay. All right. So, that'll definitely be something we want to pay attention to, moving forward. So, before we move into old business, anything else before we jump straight into our sales tax project updates? Okay. We'll move on. Old business. What's our, I mean, everybody should have gotten a written copy here. On the East Maryland widening, how is that coming along? I mean, I see a lot of 100% here.
They've pulled off, they've taken down all the signs, the striping's on the road. It's basically open.
Okay, so
We have some sod we need to replace. And some sod we need to replace that hadn't been done yet. So. They've still got a few things to go. Brian and I and his team have to do a punch list of items.
okay,
We'll be waiting on that.
okay, good deal. Country Club, I mean, I think very similar situation. We got our punch list items going there. What were we at on that one?
We
finished
compiled it today.
Yes. We did the final walkthrough, finished it up Monday. Through all the boxes. I got the list worked out. Hope we'll be sending it to them early next week.
They've got some trees to remove. 1 5-foot section of sidewalk in front of the church. There's some slopes that we are not enjoying. They're not 3-to-1. So it makes it kind of hard to mow and we need to get that corrected somehow. Our list of irrigation systems has grown. As the spring is coming, people are turning it on.
Yeah.
So, but we do have two companies working on that for us.
Gotcha. Okay. I did notice, and I guess it's really more towards the east side of the construction activities. There's 2 or 3 yards that, I guess they figured since they had material kind of up there in the right of way, they decided they didn't have to mow that or take care of it. It looks pretty bad.
I believe code enforcement has visited with them.
Well, that's good. That's good.
We just need to remind, the citizens that there's also an ordinance out there. I'm not sure which number that you are responsible for the right of way.
Well, it always is interesting to me, when you start having those right of way conversations, and I don't know if people just didn't realize when they bought their homes or whatever, but when you start talking to them about, what's right of way and what's not, there's always a few that come back and go, well, if that's yours, then you take care of it. And give that little head shake and yeah. So, okay, good deal. I appreciate that.
Hempel's coming right along. They're doing the undercut now, and they've made it up to Cherry. We had a little problem getting them to pass a roll test. We had Terracom, engineering come out, and they redid their analysis, and we added some fabric to the ground so that the rock won't sink in, and hopefully that'll stiffen it up, plus another 6 inches of asphalt or aggregate.
Okay. Now, what is, I know you got to educate, the dummy here. What's the undercut? And I think you told me last month.
Where they take off the material out of the road, and then they fill it back in with good material.
Okay.
Like shale or rock.
Gotcha.
And Lon, I know I asked last month, and I see a note here. I mean, obviously, and the reason I bring this up is that I continuously have been getting some phone calls about the mainly the AT&T line. So obviously we're still.
We're still battling that. AT&T's told us they were good to go, and that they were 3 feet below the surface, and it turned out they were 6 inches below the surface. So they get cut every day, and we pretty much got an AT&T tech on site fixing them.
Well, I don't know what to do with that company.
But yeah, they are getting fixed as soon as they break. We also hit a water line the other day, so we got that fixed. Jacksonville Cato, phase 1 stuff is pretty much complete. We have a roll plot over on the table, so you can see it over at the window.
Okay, I was looking around going, all right, there it is. Okay, gotcha.
We're still working on some acquisitions. We've got a meeting set with Track 24 tomorrow at 1 o'clock. To discuss replacing the water line in his yard, so that we can at least get started with that.
So how many acquisitions have we got left? I mean, it seemed like we've been down to 1 or 2 for a long time. I mean, is it more than that, or is it still?
It is. It's only 5 or 6 left, we're trying to work on the southern part of the road, get that, because that's where the CAW is going to be starting to replace the water line. And the northern's pretty much going in pretty, it's quick.
Some of them went to the title company too, didn't they?
Yes, yeah, we have 2 of them that's they have what they call a partial release of the property of the mortgage, and I know we're waiting on Classy County Special School District for Jacksonville Cato up there. That's, we're going to be closing in on that pretty soon. And we just closed, just get the paperwork from one yesterday or earlier this week. So we got maybe about 5 or 6 total, but trying to do the southern part of the road, so CAW can go in and start replacing the water lines.
But there's only one though, I mean, like, they're in the works, like,
Yes.
is it agreed upon?
Yes,
You just have one that is still, we've not come to an agreement. So
Gotcha.
that's what I meant by the one versus the other ones were just kind of in the paperwork
Yes.
stage, the title company.
the title company's on those.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay.
Sherwood Drainage Project, they updated their engineer's estimate. Brian, did you?
It's in the packet here, it's also listed under old business. You want to cover it then, you want to cover it now, we can cover it now.
Yeah, let's go ahead and cover it while we're here, that's fine.
Okay. Remove updated cost estimate of $1,102,425.50. The updated cost estimate for Thomas Engineering. I know last month there were some questions as far as, what the project encompassed. I do have the plans over here on the table. If any of you want to see it on paper, see what it actually covers.
Yeah, I think, because we haven't, as a committee, we haven't given a go on that, have we?
No,
Okay, yeah, I think it's important that we all understand, what that is and before we vote. So let's
What was the original number? Or
the original estimate that was done, a year ago or
Right.
a year and a half ago, it was, I don't have it in front of me, but it was right around $1 million. If I recall correctly, I think it's 900 and something thousand. The things had gone up. They told me just as a rough number to add a percentage to it. A month and a half ago till they got to rework it, which put it somewhere around 1.2 million, but when they sharpened their pencil and actually went through it line by line, they come up with basically 1.1 million. Yeah.
And Tracy is applying for a grant.
He is, the big issue with a grant is we probably wouldn't know whether we would even receive it till late August. And so it puts you off to doing it next year. And if that's the case, we've got a lot of time.
Well, let's take a look at the project, and I'm not sure how that's going to work from a reporting perspective, but let's go take a look at what we've got on paper, and at least everybody can be familiar with what work we're trying to get done.
So. Almost easy to explain from the top. You start the project at the bottom, this is all we have to do. This is Roberta and. This is a big open concrete drainage field. We've got this drainage box. Here, this is where the project will begin. This is what we're looking at right now, what's in the ground today. So we've got this 36-inch corrugated metal pipe. It comes to a box that jumps down to a 30-inch corrugated metal pipe under this man's driveway. This is where it's labeled under the driveway and the temporary driveway. Goes to another box in this backyard that Roberta and. Flowing down from talking to grass, here Roberta Ann in this backyard. The water, it'll make more sense when we get up here, but the water ends up running over them because the pipe won't handle it. So we end up pushing fences down and running across the church parking lot, pushing fences down, it ends up in this backyard, and then they drive into the all thing. Pushes this fence down, it pushes the fence all the way down the culvert. When we get one of those flash flood fence. So your 30-inch corrugated metal pipe with all the corrugated metal pipe, there's no law on that. And it's, I think, 4 years old. So we get up here under Dyson, and it goes down to 24-inch RCT pipe, and we're 24-inch over Cross Dyson, Claremont, 24-inch up along Claremont, we cut across in the backyard, and we're still 24-inch. We get behind the houses on Culver here, this 24 inch. And we've got this 42 inch RCP pipe that goes into the 24. We've got 48 by 26 arc pipe under the road and going up here to this area is the Verona Park area, the watershed that comes into this. You've also got the watershed that comes from Verona down the hill and meets this. All of this ends up during the big flood starting over here because you've got this restriction back here. So it blows these lids off of the drain. Floods this part of the street, most of this lady's carport. I don't know that it's ever gotten in her house. If it has, I haven't heard of it. It does wash the car, just washes her fences away. It's a mess. Now, I would think that, well, you saw the 24 inch pipe on down, it pushes the lids off on Claremont as well. It's hydraulically, it doesn't work.
But what's the new?
This is what they propose. They're gonna replace down here at the bottom. I forget that was a 32 by 30 inch man-made box there. They're gonna replace it with 5 foot wide by 3 foot tall box culvert. They're gonna bring it through these yards. They're gonna bring the box culvert all the way up to this backyard with the water ends up over in the garage under the main driveway that's washing place, and they pick up with our RCP pipe that's 65 inch by 40 inch. I mean, that's huge compared to 30 inch there. And the reason it jumps around and changes is due to cover issues, trying to vary, don't buy big enough to keep it underground as much as you can. So we end up with 54 inch RCP through the church's parking lot, and they convert back to a arch pipe, a 65 by 40 pipe, and that goes all the way up to the intersections up the side of the road. They're gonna retain the 42 inch pipe that's alongside this yard, but they're gonna upgrade that 24 to 42. But what they're also gonna do is you've got the watershed from Verona meeting and trying to get it underground and in the inlets. And you've also got water coming from this way. It has to get in those inlets. They're gonna extend the 24 inch with inlets up here at Verona to try to fill that water on and get it in underground where it doesn't have to try to compete here. They're also gonna run a 36 inch RCP pipe around this way in the right of way. Because you can't get big enough structures and cover over these backyards. And add, a large inlet here to try to get all this. If we can get all this water underground here, it'll quit running over them through the neighborhood, especially fences down, and we can have it. A good project, it's just what it's a lot of life.
Yeah. This will be, originally, this is, well, open now.
Well, none of it's open. It's all closed right now. This was a concrete ditch someone had built at one point in time. It's, like I said, it's 32 by 34 inch, and it's somebody that put a concrete top on it. Probably on it. But they'll change it to a 60 inch, 5 foot wide by 3 foot tall box over. And that's one time you get this a covered box that's existing, and it daylight in the open ditch on the other side of Elwood. So in general, how deep is all this pipe? A lot of it's not very deep at all. This is in the front yard, you can see the top of some of the bridge with that corrugated metal, like 30, 33. A lot of it is covered on the dog. This current parking lot's got a lot of field in it. This is all, you can't see it here, but it's almost a block behind those houses. That's why they were able to put this 54 inch ground must be the, there's plenty over there. When you get in these yards, it's very little cover in here. That's why they had to run a relief route around. And we need to improve the inlet, try to figure out how to get it in the inlets. Gotcha. Okay, any questions? Question?
Right.
Okay, Brian, appreciate you guiding us through that. I'd like to, you know, get this one off our plate one way or the other, either, you know, vote to move forward with it or vote to not, well, whatever the case may be. A not vote would be a not vote for a while. At some point, it's got to be done, you know.
I mean,
So,
it's just my opinion on this, we're this far along with it. It's obviously something that needs, I mean, it's got to be done, like you said. And we're this far along with it. My opinion would be, you know, let's make the next step with it.
okay.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I mean, material prices are just continue to skyrocket. So, you know, the longer we push this off, I think, you know, the worse it's gonna sting later on.
Yeah.
What do y'all want Tracy to do? He's got 2 grants that he's working on for this project. And Billy and I were talking about it, it's not like an RDOT type of grant, it's not as complicated, but you still want him to move forward to try to get those grants, or do you want him to?
Well, I mean, I would hate to say no to the grants, but I think if we, well, what does it change? I mean, if we vote to, you know, send it to bid or to council, I mean, what does that change from the grant perspective?
I just needed to know whether or not y'all wanted to just fund it, or do you want us to look for, you know, outright fund it, or look for additional funding?
Well, we always want additional funding, but I think if that were to fall through, then I think, well, and I won't speak for you guys, but I mean, I'm prepared to fund it at full cost and then hope we get some,
What, it's my understanding of the grant from talking with Tracy is there's one grant, you know, there's acronyms for all of them, but there's one that could possibly fund most of it, if not all of it. And I think we would know if we got it late in the year, but you can't go on and start the project and then get the grant funding to reimburse you. I don't understand why, but they won't allow us to do that. There's another grant that there's a possibility you could get $300,000 of funding, and we would probably know by the first part of August when it would fund. But this job, if you were going to do it this year, ideally you would bid it now and get people, you know, shovels in the ground by July, because it needs to be done during the dry time. Starting in August is not ideal. You'd probably still want to carry over till next year and started at that point. That's going to be a pretty big job, and you really won't want to fight water if you could keep from it, but not saying that they wouldn't. I don't know if that helps any.
so you tell me, Brian, what do you need?
My
You
concern,
tell us.
you know, we've got the man's driveway temporary in it, you know, and I don't have a crystal ball. You know, it may make it till next year and it may not. We may get a big rain this weekend that puts his driveway out, and then we're looking at having to do something temporary there. We've already done something temporary, and
Could it be done in sections so that, like, you could potentially start on one section and apply for a grant on another section?
anything's
It's a
possible.
huge job, right?
It's a big job.
It can't all get done in a few months.
No,
We have a process. Do we have a process for the job?
it's $1.1 million, just a little over.
Grant probably needs something.
There's a brick grant that would only cover about 300,000. That's the one that we might know by August. Now, I've got another project sitting on the table that we could throw, it's a brick grant as well. There was also some discussion about the other grant. You know, I asked Tracy today, you know, what's the possibility of throwing phase 2 of Jacksonville Cato at it, or some portion of it, because you're mitigating the flooding issue
Right,
they're a large portion of that anyway.
yeah. Which grant is that?
Brick grant's the one that's 300,000. I can't remember what that,
I thought it was the opposite, but
Do you?
I could be wrong.
Brick grant is probably the bigger.
Yeah,
Is
brick
brick
is
the-
through FEMA, and
Okay.
that's the big one.
all right. The other one's through Central Arkansas Planning, the 300, I think.
Yeah, they
Yes.
administer it.
Yeah, it's, Tracy Texas.
Okay.
HND.
As in
There you
the-
go.
There you go. And that may be one, two, or second phase on one.
I didn't know it would,
Yeah, or Jacksonville Cato, but that could be, I don't know, he told me that this is, if we broke it up, potentially if we didn't get the FEMA one, then if we broke it up into 3 different sections of projects, is what they advised him on, that you could get the 300,000, the 300,000, and the 300,000, kind of do it that way.
mhm.
I'm just trying to give you guys as much information as possible.
Well, see, my view would be, to approve it and then tell you guys to do it as cheaply as you can. I mean, that would mean pursuing the grants and everything else. I don't know that's fair, but I mean, it's hard for the committee to make a recommendation when there's 3 different directions being given to us and 2 seconds to think about it. So, I mean, again, it's, what do you guys need? I mean, if this is
Yeah, but I think that's, I mean, because at one point when we were looking at moving forward, it was like, no, let's pull back and see where we are financially. But I think if you'll give us the latitude of saying, yes, we think this is a worthy project, move forward, and we'll try to get it done as cheaply through either grants or, through one of these 2 grants potentially, and there may be some more out there now. We've got a grant writer and focus on that. And if not, then worst case scenario, we move forward full funding.
And CAPD is pretty good. If you tell them what the project is about, telling them, how likely it is to be funded, in my experience.
Right.
okay. So, and I guess too, I mean, you throw Jacksonville Cato in there. So if we apply for and get and accept, say, a brick grant, does that take us out of that for Jacksonville Cato, or is it one or the other? I mean, how does
I
that
think
work?
it's cycles, isn't it? Doesn't that come around in cycles? You
Yeah,
could get a portion of the phase of Cato maybe now in this cycle. But do we have enough engineering to even apply for that yet? So,
The more engineering you have, the better your chances are. So I would say, you could apply, but probably would been with the level of engineering you have right now.
So this would be,
Yes, we would, because we've got, and that's what Tracy was, when he talked to the people at it, they said, because the engineering's already done on this, that we would score really high.
so,
And then once Jacksonville, Cato, second base gets longer, the engineering gets farther down the path, that's another one that we can then apply for.
we'll be in the next cycle at that point. So if y'all, like the mayor said, if y'all are prepared to move forward at whatever direction to come up with in the near future, we'll just let you know what we find out on the grant funding and what's going to be best.
or those one-time grants, or do they cycle, you use the word cycle? I mean, obviously they have to do with drainage, if I'm flooding, correct? So,
From what Tracy told me, it's like on one of these, it's a year, the 300,000 is a year for it, so he said what he would. Is that you split it into 3 sections and you apply for one year, and then because it's gonna take a while.
sure,
To get all of it done, it's a huge project. And then the next year you do the second section, and the next year you do the third, and with each rotation, we apply for another 300,000.
Gotcha.
But whether it's on this project or whether it's on the Jacksonville Cato, it's 300,000, whichever way we go, that's, coming out of that we don't have to take out much.
The brick grant, which is larger, it tends to be annual. It's really, that's based more on the amount of money that the Congress puts at it. So there are years when there's no funding for it, and then there's years when there's a whole lot of funding for it, but it still is on an annual cycle.
But the first one, we could go ahead and start a phase and it not affect getting the grant, the 300,000, because the brick, if I understood, you needed to wait, correct?
Probably.
Yeah,
The brick would be the one that would cover like
yeah.
all the ones. Yeah.
What do you guys think?
You know, I think I'm back to my original comment. I think we're far enough along. Unfortunately, this is not the only type of project like this that we're going to have in our future. And by postponing it, we're just kicking the can a little further down. So in my opinion, I think we need to do what you said, and let's keep applying for the grants and do whatever. And if we can split it in different phases, I think it's something we go ahead and kick to the council.
Okay, so I get that in the form, and I believe the way that go, it get kicked to bids.
Okay.
Once the bids were in, then it would go to council for approval, or what do we do there?
Yeah, I don't think we can go out to bid till we actually have a grant in place, if we're gonna utilize grant funding. Because once
Well,
we go to bid,
then there's no action for us to take.
That's right.
I mean, if that's the way we're gonna do
That's right.
things, I
If we're
mean,
gonna use grant funding, we're gonna have to find out if we get a grant before we go to bid with it.
okay, Brian, ball's back in your court, brother. Done played volleyball enough with that one. Okay. So moving on then with our project updates.
Why we're moving along, and it's almost complete. We've got the box culverts in. It's connected back to the ditch paving. The ditch has been opened up and it's draining well. All they gotta do is clean up and lay some sod and put in the road.
Cool.
It should be done a couple of weeks.
Hey, I'm liking it. We're getting a lot in the done column here. Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Indian Head Lake sidewalks, formerly known as the Deerfield sidewalks. I will. You want to talk about it? Because I don't know much
I
about it.
know very little about it.
It's gone out to bid. The bid was awarded to Wooster. And I think we're just waiting for a notice to proceed.
There's been a notice of award signed, waiting on to get the, documents back. We're in the process of scheduling a pre-con, and that's when we'll sign the contracts and get them started. It's not far.
That's all I got.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on then. We talked about Sherwood Acres. Let's from a future agenda perspective, let's just roll that up into the sales tax project updates instead of having a separate line item for it. And
For sure with Edwards.
yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Okay, so our house on East Maryland, Miss Jenny Martin, she's here with us, her and her husband. What's our status on the whole issue and everything that we had there?
We consider it resolved.
Okay. So, Jenny, you want to come up and talk with us and tell us what your view of things is?
Especially with all the issues with the tornado, my parents were affected with that too.
Sure, come on up.
Oh,
Here, you want my seat or?
No, I can stand.
Oh, come on.
I've given it a little bit and we've watched the rain. It's still holding water and the salt's still coming in. So it holds about 3 inches of water in that culvert. My concern is this wasn't their original project. This is what we came to conclude to fix it. It's not fixed. It's not draining properly. it's still holding water. We're getting into summertime. That's gonna just cause mosquitoes, larvae. And it's just not. It's not right. Looks great, but it's just not, it has standing water.
So,
And even the part that we're about to do on our side isn't gonna help it.
where is the water standing at? Can you?
Like in the culvert itself, I have a few pictures if you need to see them. Like the culvert, when the rain is finished, like you could go by and see it right now. The water is sitting in it. It's not draining anymore, it sits in it. It's about 2.5, 3 inches deep with mud.
Okay, so we're talking back the sidewalk towards your home, where it's going down, is that where
You
you're
look on
talking?
left where they built the culvert, yes.
Okay. On the left side of your
Yeah,
driveway, if
you're
you're
Mhm.
looking at,
Mhm.
okay. So where the
There's
crepe
a drain
myrtles were?
break, yes,
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. So, so we got standing water there. What about on the other side of the driveway in the main part of the yard? Is that to your,
I mean, it still holds
Satisfaction.
water. I mean, it's still, but we've had a lot of rain. I mean, we've had a lot of rain. I will tell you, it's not coming up over since they redone the sidewalk. It's not coming over the sidewalk into the yard like it was previously. So, but the yard itself right there is still pretty mushy, but my biggest concern is that side right there. And like, we're gonna take the other, us personally, we're gonna take the other crepe myrtle out and we're gonna put some river rock in ourselves, but that's not gonna solve the full drainage and that holding that in that culvert.
sharing with, yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you. Appreciate your time. You know, I don't, guys, I don't know, everything that's been done there. I don't know what else can be done. You know, I would certainly just, I mean, I ask that we look. I mean, you know, obviously, I mean, you know, we've got rain today, we've got rain over the weekend. I mean, and, you know, I don't have any,
If it helps, you know, we've not done the final walkthrough yet. Myself and the street supervisor have gone through almost 60 boxes on Country Club Monday, and we'll do the same thing down here. We'll be in the boxes, and that's one thing we're looking at, looking down pipes and
yeah,
seeing if mud's there, if there's bellies in them, if there's something that's holding water back, we'll get them to rectify it.
Water back, I mean, it's draining.
If there's water standing, something's holding it back.
Well, that's true, but if the culvert's not built correctly too, that can hold it back too from completely draining, correct?
You know, it would have to be a belly, or maybe there's mud down in there or
Right.
something that's got it obstructed, but that's what we're looking for when we crawl the pipes and look down them and.
okay. Well, you know, I just asked that we go over it with a fine tooth comb and, you know, require, you know, require the best from the contractor and, you know, make sure that they're doing everything that they're supposed to do to resolve these issues and,
You would go by, after this and take a look at it. It may be hard for, we will make sure that it's correct, but there's not much fall to the land there. I did go by and check on it earlier this week. It was not, you know, we've had so much rain and it was still a little bit, I wouldn't, you know, and I don't know if there's any way that there's never gonna not be some in it, just kind of like a lot of places where it just is because of the fall, maybe the problem, but we'll definitely check it again just to make
Okay.
sure, but.
Very likely with all the sod work and river loam that's been put in, and if it's minimal fall on the pipes, it's very, very possible that there's a dirt dam in there right now. Okay, it's not the pipe itself then.
No, I don't believe it's pipe.
One side or to the left of your drive.
Of course, it goes into the
And with
box.
all due respect, I mean, this.
But I think there's fall into the box.
It's just, get it to the bottom.
Mhm.
Maybe it's got a little belly in it.
Very easily see the invert in that box having some mud or something, maybe, we'll check it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, moving on then, you know, I use the term truck routes and for lack of a better term. Last month, Chief Hager brought us a deal from, I believe it was North Little Rock. Was that policy or was that an ordinance? Okay, an ordinance, and it, you know, really the situation that we're dealing with directly is Silver Creek. I don't know what they call them, a car hauler, you know, pulling in and then going up into a neighborhood circle drive and circular, not a circle, but it makes a, and then they're going up and they're using that to turn around in and you know, of course, you know, disturbing the neighbors, what have you. So at one point in time, we put up a no trucks sign and, you know, okay, maybe that bluff worked for a short period. It didn't work for very long. And now we've got neighbors that are saying, hey, we got no trucks there. Why can't we enforce it? You know, basically, you know, there's no laws inside the city of Sherwood that gives you any bite behind putting up a no truck sign, you know. So the ask is that, you know, we decide whether we want to, you know, pursue, you know, something, you know, with, you know, trucks and where they can go in the city of Sherwood or where we can't and, or we don't. And so that's kind of where we're at. I think everybody took that home with them last week and interested in input from you guys and of course, anybody else that wants to comment as well. So we'll just kind of start right there.
Well, I know of 3 roads right now that have had no truck signs on them. Country Club had them on there. They've not been put back on since construction is complete, I don't think. Tandy Lane currently has them on it in Silver Creek. Like you said, they're just pretty much a bluff at this point, so.
The intersection of Country Club and Wildwood, I mean, what Country Club has them and Wildwood does have them.
So,
Sorry about that.
right.
North Hills. I don't even have a ground.
We were talking about, you know, we still need to put one more traffic cushion on Silver Creek. That might help to take care of the truck. So I don't want to go with the truck.
Well, certainly more than one way to skin that cat than just, you know, putting in a,
Well, no,
you know.
we're going to anyway. We still needed to put one more on, but that may resolve that. Rush off, is my point. They're not gonna want to go in that.
The main complaint is the truck going down and turning around to that first road to the right, which I think would be before they get to the traffic cushion.
Well, I did some research. I didn't, you know, dive all over the United States on the internet or anything like that, but just some local stuff. You know, in addition to what, you know, the chief brought us, you know, last month. I did print this and I'll read it aloud. It's not very long, but it seems to me that it would address some, but maybe not all of the issues. It shall be unlawful for any person, firm, or corporation to operate or cause to be operated any truck of more than 3/4 ton capacity upon any road, street, or other public thoroughfare in the city of Sherwood, excepting, however, any state or federal highway or designated truck route, whether now or hereafter established and designated. This section is not to be construed to prohibit delivery trucks from making local deliveries within the corporate limits of the city of Sherwood, or to prohibit any person living within the corporate limits of Sherwood from operating such trucks upon the streets of the city when it becomes necessary to reach the home of such person, or to prohibit operation of trucks in going to or coming from places of business within the city which are not situated upon truck routes, state or federal highways. But in all such accepted instances, the truck shall remain upon the truck route or state federal highway to the nearest exit to the destination and shall utilize the shortest and most direct route in passing between the truck route and or state or federal highway and the destination. You know, really quick, I think I got that from Conway, and I plugged Sherwood in place of Conway. I stole it off of their website. So no plagiarism. I fessed up to it. But I mean, it seems to me that their section was pretty direct. It was straightforward. You know, there may be some things that we would want to tweak. You know, the chief and I were talking about, you know, maybe a 1-ton truck would, you know, be the limit as opposed to a 3/4 ton. And then there's issues, you know, like the ones you brought up where, you know, this time of year with the trucks that are pulling trailers, you know, with lawnmowers and things of that nature. You know, we want to make sure we don't deter or stop that from happening. And, you know, so, but I guess before we go a whole lot further as a committee here, I mean, is this something that we feel like we need to do, you know, to the city to put something together and then send it on to the council? Or is this not an issue big enough for us to even be concerned with? I say big enough. Is this an issue we want to take on? Yes or no? I mean, how big or small doesn't really make a difference.
From my standpoint, you know, one of the ones that we had with the no truck route on Tammy Lane, it's a very narrow road. Truck should not be on it. And if you did it for no other road than that, I think it's necessary. I don't know if any of you, are y'all familiar with Tammy Lane, how narrow it is?
Yeah.
Well, the mail trucks used to be Salmon. I think Salmon's still in business, but they avoid that intersection at McCain when the traffic's heavy and they come down Round Top and they cut across Tammy because it's quicker than going down to Trammell. Where the Round Top station is, they'll cut across Tammy and you've got those 18-wheelers going down that little narrow road, and the people that live there don't like them going down it, and the road doesn't hold up well to it. They just really don't have any business on it. And so if
I mean, you just need to tell us and we can get to working on it. We have something to go before the council. We want to go ahead and send it ahead of time. Or go to the council to you guys, or you want to like next month we could write something. You want to have more time to think about it and review it then before it goes to council. Or we can just.
And in all honesty, you know, a blanket ordinance, it may be just as well to have it on any road that has a posted no truck route, you know, that ordinance applies to you. I've seen the signs in other cities that say, you know, no trucks per ordinance 1936 or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, and that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say, and I'm gonna speak on behalf of the guys driving these cars with blue lights on them. It is very, and me and Brian have talked about this. It's very difficult for a 21, 22-year-old kid that's out here working for them to understand and know the size of a truck, what the gross weight capacity of a truck is that meets the criteria. And that was the issue that I had with North Little Rock's ordinance. It was really complicated. What I would prefer see us do if we're going to pass an ordinance, and this is just an ask, think about the enforcement end of the deal. And what I would prefer to see us do is identify street signs on it. And then if you're on a, you know, and whatever, you know, whether you identify by axle, gross weight capacity, whatever, something that, you know, is pretty evident that that truck's not supposed to be on that stretch of road between those signs, then it becomes easy to enforce. So that would be my ask. And I don't, you know, one of the things that kind of stood out to me when we first started having this conversation was that, you know, we talked about Tammy Lane, we talked about Country Club, we talked about Silver Creek. Well, those are places that we get complaints on. But we don't get a lot of complaints about trucks coming in and out of town. We don't. Now, you know, I don't know about City Hall and I don't know about what the aldermen are getting, but we don't get a lot of complaints except for those that have been identified and their signs on it. So, I mean, that just for what it's worth, you know, just to kind of keep that in mind, if you don't care if as we talk about an ordinance.
We've had a few instances too in the past few years, and I feel like there'll be more. Where people are setting up mining operations on roads that really aren't. They're not set up to handle that type of traffic and load on them, and sometimes it would help to be able to put a gross vehicle weight rating on a road to stop that, especially, you know, when we've got a mining operation just out of the city limits, but yet they're gonna use our road to bring it into town.
Yeah, okay.
This happens a lot, you know, you think about like all the 18 million that I used to see at Walmart. Coming in the house sometimes on Maryland. It was in a state highway.
Yeah, well, most everything that I saw, you know, beyond doing, you know, something simple or, you know, like what I read to you, similar to what Conway's got going on, and their section was a little longer dealing with a few different things, but, you know, a lot of it dealt with the creation of an identified truck route. So if you've got trucks that are going to be in your city, then there's an identified truck route that says this is how they can progress through Sherwood or whatever municipality you're dealing with. You know, I was trying not to create something that required us to identify and create a truck route per se. And so, you know, my mindset was going along the lines of, you know, we have major arterials, we have minor arterials, we have collectors, and then we have what are considered local roads or residential roads. And if we define, you know, something in an ordinance about, you know, no, you know, like I said, you know, 3/4 ton trucks or whatever, I mean, we can dive into that, you know, on local roads, you know, but then maybe I thought, well, you know, some roads we would consider collectors, you know, would also fit right in there. I mean, they're neighborhood collectors, you know, that run on to Brockington or run on to, you know, Keel Avenue or what have you. So, but what's the thought of you guys? I mean, where's your head at?
Well, my thought is, I mean, what I'm hearing, there's situations where it's no doubt something is needed. What we're doing now is leaving enforcement with nothing. So that in my mind says what that process is, how it needs to be written. Yeah, that's still a step we've got to figure out, but in order to move forward, whether that be you know, something written from this committee, I don't know how that would normally work, or if it's just a recommendation to the council to come up with an ordinance, but I think we need to have something if we're going to have those situations that, you know, if we start pretty generically, you know, because I'm like you, having to, that's a big piece to have to designate a truck route and, you know, some of that kind of stuff, and it's going to take a little thought.
Okay. Any thoughts on your behalf?
Well, you know, I'm kind of more in the favor of, I guess, finding out the problem roads, you know, and drafting an ordinance to take care of the smaller, you know, issues, and not just a whole blanket, you know,
Okay.
ordinance to cover the whole city.
So
I don't know what that language would look like, you know,
What about circling back to the posting signage on a road that says, you know, no trucks over gross vehicle weight of, let's grab 12,000 pounds out of there right now. Our ordinance X. And at that point, if there's a road that needs to be addressed, you put the signage on each end of it. It's enforced by the ordinance on the sign, and there shouldn't be anything greater than a
26,000
12,000 or 15,000 pounds or whatever, unless it's you know, you've got to have that clause in there, local business, moving truck going to the home, you know, that had language that allowed for a homeowner to bring a truck in, a dump truck to bring them some dirt or.
So kind of to Chief's argument though, or concern is, you know, how does his guys know that truck's hauling over 12,000 pounds or whatever that may be? I mean,
Gross vehicle weight rating is posted on the door on the sticker.
Well, I
When you
think,
open the door.
I think you make it 26,000 and then, you know, essentially that becomes a commercial vehicle and then anything over that.
Okay.
So if they run a commercial tag.
I don't think you could say
Kinda
that
hard to know
because
when you pull one.
I mean, they're company pickups with commercial tags. But 26,000 would break it over into that
It's just,
federal motor carrier, you know, and everybody that is over 26,000 should know the laws and what that truck would gross.
right.
If it's, so do y'all think if they're not able to park on that street, do you think they would still be going through the cul-de-sac?
I'm just wondering if we put up no parking signs in Silver Creek. Maybe leaving the parking in Silver Creek, because it's only 27 feet wide anyway, it's not wide enough.
I think you can park delivering, can't you?
Yeah, so there's a difference between park and standing. So that's, if it's attended and you're unloading the vehicle, that's considered standing on park.
You say no parking forcing? Or dancing or something?
Well, you could probably, I mean, there's nothing saying that we couldn't, you know, post it and say, no unloading.
Why don't we try that? Because that's where the problem is. Rather than writing something that might impact the whole city, let's just take the smallest step first and see if we can address. Because it's the guys that are parking there unloading their cars, isn't it? Really, isn't that the problem?
Well, the problem is they unload their cars, but they turn off toward the road.
If we make it where they can't unload the cars there though, then they're gonna have to come up with something else, like pull into the lot and unload them on the lot. And go out through the access road.
How does that help us on, say, Candy Lane or Country Club?
We really don't have a problem, or we haven't gotten any complaints on Tammy as long as, I mean, in a long time.
I have a problem with it on Sandy because it's tearing the road up.
Not talking about getting complaints, the signs that work.
Right, well, they work, but they really don't. If you sit out there, you'll still see some trucks come down it. There's just nobody complaining right now.
If they're going through a Tammany Lane or Country Club, that kind of sounds like more of the situation we were talking about earlier, where you may need a designated truck route for the trucks that taking that path.
So I mean, if we put a no loading or unloading, I mean, how would you guys enforce that? I mean, how would that help the enforcement of that?
Well, and I mean, Steve would probably have to weigh in on that, but I think if you say that, what's it require in the past to put no parking sign? We can enforce it, the sign's there, no parking from here to there, you're parked there, we write a ticket.
Well, we have an ordinance for that.
An ordinance on, culture. Remember that, and they have an issue there, so I would think that an ordinance that was specific to the, location and what it needed to say. would be sufficient.
Yeah. But we just have to have something that we can cite. That's the problem that we have right now. It says no trucks, but we don't have anything to cite when we come in there. There's no states that comes. There's no state statute against it, and there's no city ordinance as it stands against it, so we have nothing to cite. If you have a specific ordinance or a specific state statute, we can cite and that. So I think we have a parking statute, a parking ordinance, so if we had an ordinance that gave us or amend that parking ordinance to include.
Well, I think that was specific to cold, I don't think.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, there was an issue, I think. Yeah, dangerous.
There is an MUTCD example sign that says no sanding, so there's a precedent for
Oh, well, I mean, if we, yeah.
Now, what language was that you were speaking?
that. The manual on uniform traffic control devices, it's the Bible for street signs.
So do we need an ordinance designating that area as an understanding, or can we just put up a no standing sign and they can?
Probably the easiest thing to do would be to amend your existing parking ordinance to add standing to it, so that law enforcement officers could write a citation for standing, saying that they can do it for parking, and then it would just be in areas where standing is expressly prohibited by signage.
So, I mean, can you put something together and present to this committee next month
Sure.
along that lines?
Sure.
And, okay,
And maybe on Tandy, we need to say no commercial.
I still think the no truck sign with the weight limit on it,
That's
with an ordinance to back it up, just, I mean, it does it. It
That
would
makes
do
it
it there.
separate ordinance.
It-
You know,
it would
let's
do.
split the two things.
The thing that the no standing is gonna do there and the no parking is right now, they could still unload there and not cause a problem downstream if we put the no trucks beyond this point or whatever, if we put it beyond Buffalo Wild Wings, what it would require them to do is pull past it on the service road and back in. They'd have to have somebody from lot, flag them in, they could still unload there on Silver Creek, not on the service road. Right now, if we do it the way, if we don't let them park there, they're gonna unload on the service road. What Russell Chevrolet does is on the other side of the interstate.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible idea, but they do, and they've got room on their lots. They just tend to put so many cars on their lot that they can't get the truck in there to unload it.
I don't think that's been a problem for anybody lately,
Yeah,
a couple of years.
well, that's a good point. I don't know why they don't pull it in the lot now, because there's not any cars on the lot.
Right, because it's easier.
You're right, it is easier.
Well, how about if we work? Something to address Tammy, something to address Silver Creek. We're not getting any calls right now on Country Club. I don't know any, I don't know if you've gotten any comments.
No, that sounds good, but then if we get something in place, then, I mean, ordinance in place and it becomes a problem, then all we've gotta do is put signs up on either end of the street and then the ordinance is already there. So, yeah, if you guys would bring that to this committee for approval to send to council, that'd be great.
I agree with you that probably for your purposes, a way to understand it makes the most sense, but I understand your concern about it. Of course, one thing to consider about. like I said, the vehicles, you mentioned delivery vehicles, is that generally, there's an exception if the commercial vehicle's destination is along the route that you're prohibited.
No, there has to be, a dump truck or a concrete truck bringing concrete to resident, but your bill of lading's gonna.
Yeah, they'll have a bill of lading and the officer will know if that's a reasonable route to take to get there, so.
Right. The no commercial vehicle may be easier to enforce.
But we'll also know if we watch them pull out of the mine just out of the city limits and turn and come down our road, that you're using that as a cut through and you should have turned left and used a different route.
Right. Right.
Right.
Okay. Well, put that on our to-do list.
Okay. Anything else there before we move on? All right, we'll move into new business. Geez, we need to get moving. Do what?
I said, chop.
Yeah, no doubt. Seminole Trail Street resurfacing, I did get an email. I think I forwarded that and I'm sure that's why Belinda put it on here, but would like for that to be considered in the resurfacing project, Brian, was my intent behind adding it here.
The only reason it hasn't been resurfaced with asphalt is there's a steep hill on that road, a sharp curve. There's a number of driveways that do not have enough, rise in them to prevent water from running down them as it is. And if we add 2 inches of asphalt, we're gonna fill in what gutters left there and put water down driveways, and they already have water in garages, yards. I've been on a number of complaints, and that's the only reason I haven't done it. There's a possibility of paving out of the curb, which seldom ever works really well. It creates a double bump coming out of the driveways. It ravels, it looks terrible. And we would pave out of the gutter for a half a dozen homes and create a problem for several more homes. And you end up with people wanting you to fill part of that in. And even if you don't fill it in, they'll come back and fill it in with concrete. And then you have water that stands, you know, for 15 feet back where they filled it in with concrete. But with all that being said, Finley is committed to walk the road with me sometime here in the near future and discuss. And, you know, I've got a few ideas. He's got some ideas, but we'll put a little discussion, try to come up with some sort of solution. But right now, the best thing I have is, you know, I know there's some places that need addressed on it, and we've got them on our list. We just haven't made it there. But, you know, that's why over the years, I've just repaired the bad spots in the concrete and continued on, because I just felt that I was going to cause too many problems if I overlaid it as it is right now.
Okay, well, I appreciate that you're looking at it. I think, I'm just looking back on the email. I think everybody on this committee got an email from Clark. And so, yeah, just, you know, we need to look and see what we can and can't do, and maybe what some of the potential solutions are there. I mean, that is a concrete street, isn't it?
It's concrete.
See, I don't.
Nail it. You know, and when you overlay in the curb, you take away 2 inches of the curb, and so many of the driveways are just poured flush in there.
So, yeah, okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that you're looking at it, and we'll hopefully you guys will come up with something, and we'll roll from there. Okay, speed control device. So, Brian, I thought I saw, I'm sure mixed up in here, you've got some information on what's happening with our.
Yes, that can be. How many pages have we got? 3 or 4? 4 pages. We have some data on Silver Creek. And Shoshone. Those two, we have the before and after we look at. We used 7 miles per hour as the tolerant threshold. Mainly because that's what we're talking about in their policy to utilize the traffic cushions. If you notice the before on both of those streets, we had 29% going 7 over on Shoshone. 20% going 7 over on Silver Creek before. And then if you go to the next page, after you install the speed cushions, we went 1% going over on Shoshone and 0% going over on Silver Creek. Was it 7 enforceable violations? Was all listed on Silver Creek, and 85 on Shoshone. Of course, if you look at traffic counts, or you had 14,000 cars on Shoshone and 3,800 cars on Silver Creek in the 7-day span. So it's drastic difference in how many cars travel the roads.
Well, I wouldn't want to be that dude that was doing 50.
Yeah, you're always gonna have that guy. Just got to see what his car or motorcycle or whatever it was will do.
You see the report for country club.
course, the average speed, decreased significantly from before and after too. You had average speed
Yeah.
of 30, and then it went down to 21, and
Half it's still.
29 and 16 was average speed. No doubt
They were.
they decreased the speed. I mean, we can, as we continue to install them on the other locations, we can get you these before and afters if you think you need them, but I think, there's no argument that it decreases the speed.
Slows people down, yeah. Okay.
Slows me down.
Do we have any input, from the police department on, any for the fire department? Any big pros or cons from your group on those, chief?
I mean, I've driven over both sets and I'm never in a hurry, so they don't bother me. I haven't gotten any complaint from the officer. I can't see the fire department.
They're not
Okay.
wasting any.
Okay. Cool. So, I think that's clear evidence that those are, doing what they were installed to do. Also asked that we, put something together, from a policy perspective. I guess that's, that what this is?
That's what that is.
Okay. So who's in charge of going through this with us?
It can be me, the mayor, wrote most of it. If you want me to do it, I'll go for it, mayor, if you wanna.
Well, here, I'll just come up with it.
Yeah.
Billy and I were just talking and, he recommends that if you all like this, then it's not something that we need to this will be the policy. Therefore, if it kind of gives us more leeway in terms of, to tweak it as we go along versus codifying it and making it an ordinance, if that makes sense.
And if you will, I think the biggest reason for that is because there's a lot of language that needs to be in this with respect to things like average traffic and stuff like that is there because really Sherwood to a degree is in need of a master street plan update, I think. So like there's some arterial that maybe you could use some traffic calming and there are some collectors that were really not appropriate. So those are the sort of things that a master street plan update would clarify. But the policy really needs to just be a policy at this point, I think, so that there's flexibility on the part of the staff to determine where it's appropriate and where it's not.
So we looked at a bunch of different policies from cities, and that's kind of the basis of this. I also worked with the chief and with Brian on it. That's where, for example, the 7 miles per hour. So one of the things that speed cushions are called are, silent police, because they do the policing when the police aren't there, because they're going, when the police is there, they're going to slow them down. So we talked about what would be, a speed at which a ticket would be written. And so basically that's where the 7 miles an hour, 5 seemed too overzealous, 10 was way too much of a leeway, 35 in a neighborhood's gonna potentially kill somebody. A lot different than the 25. We also tried to look at, you don't want to go through the expense of putting a speed cushion on a road there's hardly any traffic on. That's just wasting everybody's money essentially. So that's where we kind of looked at we looked at some of the different roads and what would be appropriate. Because like, for example, a country club, that's not a road that you're going to want to put a traffic calming device on, right? So we kind of looked at some of that. Jacksonville Cato, that's not a road that we're going to want to put a traffic calming device on.
We are in a situation where Sherwood was developed without any significant planning. And so, unlike some other cities, whenever we had developments and so forth, we didn't even think about speeds and the way they were going to be designed and what was going to be the end result in terms of that. It's kind of more maximizing profit type of thing. So we're in a situation that's different than a lot of cities, and that, like Conway, for example, when we looked at theirs, collector roads don't have driveways on them. Well, we have collectors and minor arterials that have driveways on it. So that's where we're kind of in a different, situation. So we were doing everything we could to thread the needle to where it's not overly restrictive, but it's restrictive enough. And what this would do too is, so if somebody would call and say, okay, I want, like people have been doing, I want a the speed cushion or whatever, and on my street. Okay, we put them on a list. Let's evaluate it. Let's see, does it meet the criteria in terms of, we now have the measuring devices. Let's see what that looks like. Do we have the traffic counts? Does it really warrant it speed wise? Because one thing I will tell you guys is that there can be, one incident or two incidences and where someone's going really fast and it makes you feel like, oh my gosh, everybody's going really fast, but that's really just one or two people. There are also times in which it feels like the chief is telling me on his street. He used to live on a cul-de-sac. Now he lives on a through street. And he's like, gosh, the people are driving really fast on my street. So got out his radar gun and was like, it feels like they're going really fast, but they're really not going as fast as I thought they were going to. So I think that's why we have to have something in place and some kind of measuring devices to find out, is there really a problem, is there not? We laughed about Country Club. It's really not something to laugh about. But overall, things were going great on Country Club. One car chose to go at an incredibly high speed, but that one car is not indicative of normal traffic.
If you look at these measurements, as drastic as the before and after was, the fastest speed on Shoshone before was 54. The fastest speed after the speed humps was 50. You still got that.
You're still gonna have that
Still have the
crazy
1%.
person that's gonna do it.
That person's still there.
It's the overall bringing down, So this is kind of, we wanted you guys to look it over. We've been tweaking it and retweaking it and so forth. But what this does do is it gives us a mechanism, because right now we're being inundated by people on social media or people calling the office. I want one, I want one, I want one. And it's like, well, we have to be judicious. Not every street in the city warrants a traffic cushion. So we need to be judicious in how we do this, because there is a cost involved. There is time in which is involved. And we want to do this where it's needed the most. And then, so not only do we have kind of some criteria for it to meet so that we evaluate it, then we would then go back to the person requesting it. And then you still need to get 60% of the people in that affected area have to say, yes, we want it, not just one or two people. We went with 60 because if you go 50-50, all it takes is one house turning over and it's like, we won. Okay, now, now we've got it. So we wanted it to definitely be a majority of the people who are directly, we know things like you don't put them in front of mailboxes. You don't put it in front of somebody's driveway. You try to not put it in front of somebody's front door. You try to put it on property lines. You've got to be cognizant of storm drains, curves, stops. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. You just don't stick it up. So
My intent, once we do the study, we determine that if they're needed, we're going to build some sort of signage to put in place while they're collecting signatures that says this is the proposed location, so that they can look at that and sign the petition based on. That way, when we put them there, they're there and they were.
We can
aware
put
of
up a
what-
temporary sign so everybody knows we're evaluating that, and then, you know, we'll see where that petition. But, you know, before we even go to that stage, we need to sit down with engineering, with public works, with the police, and make sure that this makes sense for that particular road,
Mhm.
you know?
So what is the recommendation, you know, like for, how far away from a stop sign would you put a speed cushion as an example? I mean, you wouldn't put one 15, 20 foot right before you get to the stop sign. I mean, you know, how does that?
You're looking at more like long stretches.
Mhm.
Right, because that's where the speeds really pick up. You don't want to have, you know, you're not going to put it right on a sharp curve because people are naturally going to slow down in those places. You know, so those are all the things that you look at. If you live right by a stop sign, I'm sorry, people are going through a stop sign. That's a police issue. That's not a traffic issue. You know, but we are looking at some other things as well. So, you know, for example, on Oak Brook. Oak Brook is too wide of a street for what is needed. We're going to stripe that for bike lanes and bring that in. We did some befores and we're gonna see after, okay, does that help by narrowing the road and restriping it? And then there's a pilot program that we thought about, that we're looking at, that Conway's participating in because the person who's invented this lives in Conway, where there are like these little blocks which give a little bit of extra protection of that bike lane. So if you hit it, you're not going to be waving in and out of the bike lane. In other words, something that's a little bit more of a barrier. We've talked about whether it's doing something that creates a little bit of a noise or if it's, you know, I'm not a big fan of those bollards or whatever that just stick up and people hit them and then, you know, I don't think that's a great solution, but we're constantly looking. And I didn't want this to be so hard and fast because of the fact that technology is constantly changing. And I imagine some of the rules in this are going to be changing. So, you know, kind of like we've seen with other things where it's like roads need to be wider, now they need to be narrower, you know, I can see that, you know, you could look at some policies and they're like they're close together. You have one and then another one, another. I don't think that's I don't think that's necessary to go to those extremes. So like the one on Shoshone, we're going to be moving one, taking it out and putting it towards the causeway so that they're not, when you go over, another one you go over. You're not going to really get those speeds up in between those two. The whole point is to send that message of, hey, I'm in a neighborhood, I need to slow down.
So then, Mayor, is it your, I mean, I would like to get something that this committee would recommend to council as a policy to be in place, you know, and have it, you know, passed at a council level. I mean, is this ready in your view for that recommendation or?
I would think so. If we did anything, it would be just, you know, minor type of stuff, but I think certainly the general in it, like I said, we would prefer it not to be a steadfast ordinance, but just a endorsed policy, so to speak. So this is what we're going to go by, but then that gives us the latitude of every time it needs to be tweaked. We're not having to then go through an amendment process and, you know. Yeah.
Are there a number of neighborhood associations in Sherwood?
No, we're not. Mm-mm. And the one, you know, the only effective one we don't have any issues with.
Okay.
So, you know, Gap Creek was such a well-designed neighborhood. It's the one with the large roundabouts. And so we don't get the speeding complaints and we don't, you know, so that's an example of, because it was well-designed on the front end, we don't have this problem, you know, and that's really our only POA to speak of.
The reason I ask is because it's not uncommon, if a neighborhood has a POA and, the speed study indicates that it's not warranted, the POA may want to pay for it themselves. And so that's a situation where then the city has to decide, well, or we may not be willing to pay for it, but would it be a problem for it to go in? But that's generally only a case if there's a PMA. It's pretty rare for individuals to band together and offer to take or something. So.
Well, and we talked about, because several cities have an option of, well, citizens can get together and pay for one, but then what about the ongoing maintenance? What about, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, and with that,
Pave a road, you want a snow plow road.
yeah.
You gotta move them, you gotta take them up.
Yeah, I
I think it either.
don't know how I feel about that,
Or
but I
doesn't.
think off the cuff, it doesn't feel like the right thing to do.
Well, and that would, like, if you're a wealthy area versus if you're not a wealthy area, right? I mean, a couple $1,000 isn't gonna be a big deal to like maybe one area of a town, but that would be too big of a hurdle in another. Doesn't feel good either.
Yeah.
So does this cover just the cushions, or are we talking about asphalt speed
This is-
humps as
it's-
well, or?
Well,
Well,
it encompasses everything, cushions, humps, tables, it's really speed control
In general?
Yeah.
devices,
It's-
whatever we.
but no speed bumps. We're not gonna do speed bumps. That's not an option, so.
And one thing to your question about putting one too close to a stop sign, Kevin. If somebody comes in here and petitions a section of road and we're, and there's a stop sign and there's a curve. And it's a long enough stretch, we're gonna put that counter somewhere in the middle, which is where we would put the speed hump. And if it's too short a stretch, it's probably not gonna meet that 7 mile/h threshold.
They're not gonna be able to
You
get
know,
the speeds up in time.
It's not gonna meet the warrants if there's just not the room for it to happen.
Yeah, so, I guess the question that I've got then, I mean, as it relates to a petition from a neighborhood or from how big of an area are you talking? I mean, are we talking about, the 4 houses around the 4-way stop sign? Is that, or are we talking, I mean, I would like to have that defined
Yeah, it's in
to a
here.
point that,
Yeah. We've got 200 feet, 250 feet before and after any proposed location of a speed cushion.
Which incidentally.
Okay.
There's pretty good engineering, guidance on the effective area of a speed cushion or a speed hump, and it's about 250 feet in each direction.
So Kevin comes to you and says, hey, man, speeding's on my street and I want speeding on my street stopped. I'm tired of it. Someone's gonna get hurt, and they throw all the guilt stuff at you. Where do you start measuring 250 feet from?
Well, the way I see that happening, Kevin, is at that point, I come out there, I look at your street, I put the counter somewhere in the middle.
Okay,
We check and we see, does it meet the 7 mile/h threshold? All right, if it does, at that point, we're gonna put our temporary signage in place that says, proposed location for speed cushion. And then I'm gonna call Kevin back and I'm gonna say, Kevin, said we put the signage out where we will place the devices. Said now you need to get the signatures 250 feet each side. We're gonna provide the petition. At that point, if they petition it in, we put it in place. That's the way I see it. Now, I'm open to criticism or
okay, so,
suggestions.
well, so I'm just running this through in my head. I mean, it's not intended
It's
to
not a
be.
big deal to put,
So
the device
you
out
go
there.
out there and you go out there and you put your stuff up and you go, yeah, speeding's a problem on this residential street. Why do I have to have a petition to get you to do something about it? I mean.
Because the people's home that we put it in front of are the ones that's gonna, for instance, say, we want to know that those homes realize it's going there and that they are okay with it being in front of their house, that speeding bothers them enough to have it there. For instance, they might have a child that sleeps in the front bedroom that has trouble sleeping and they won't be able to sleep anymore. And we've already had that take place. So we want the people that's gonna live with it right there in front of their home to say, yes, we're good with it.
Okay.
And that's the logic, in my opinion, for the petitions each side of it.
Right, and like I said, it's got to be more than just, okay, it met that, 85th percentile, 7 miles an hour. is it a street that meets these criteria? Is it, we'll go through and look at all of it and we'll look together and go, okay, yeah, that looks like a good candidate. Then you call them back. We're not going to call them back and if we don't feel as administration that, yes, this would be a good spot because of X, Y, and Z, or, but if it doesn't, then we call them back and say, I'm sorry, but it doesn't make a good location because of X, Y, and Z. So that way, because right now we just have this constant.
We've got this constant stuff flowing in, and I need a way to start putting it to bed, either, I need
Either
to
yes
call
or
them
no.
back and say, it doesn't meet it because it doesn't meet the speed threshold, or it's
Yeah.
less than 500 cars a day.
So what I see happening here, Ross, I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
No, go ahead.
No, you
I was-
please, man, I
I was-
talk enough.
I was just gonna say, put 5,000 cars a day in perspective, like take Country Club, is that in the range of 7,500 cars a day?
Yes.
So Country Club used to be at one time, and it was very steady for years. It was right around 10,000 cars a day. And it was that way for 15 years. Now I don't know what's been the last
So it's
5, but
It's like 10,000 cars a day up by Delta Dental area.
okay.
But the rest of it, no.
Gotcha.
It's more like 7,500-ish type of a thing. Now, if a street, for example, Shoshone had more than 5,000 cars a day, but isn't it?
Yes.
Right, but that-
Well,
Yeah.
that was 7 days.
Oh, that was
That's
7 days.
590,
Okay,
but-
well, never, but we did try to look at that when we looked at the policy. The other thing too, that, originally the policy had that it needed to be, during when school's in session, and we looked at that and we're like, well, that's why we just went favorable conditions. We're gonna give that street every chance in the world, right? Type of a thing. So some areas are gonna be affected by school traffic. Some areas are not gonna be affected by school traffic, so we could go ahead and do those during the summer and measure them and so forth. But if you're near a school, we need to make sure we're doing it during the school time. We put 48 hours, we'll try to do it for a longer period. Like, we were doing it for a week, but then you can only do, so many. So we feel like, well, we don't necessarily need a week, but we need more than 24 hours, so we need to do a minimum of 48, but if we can give a street a longer judgment, then so be it. Maybe it's near a church, and so, Sunday effects, I don't know, but we're just we felt like we needed to put something in place
Mhm.
to make this, fair and give us some type of standard.
So where I see a potential, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You get a 250-foot stretch of road and you get 55%, and someone, thinks it's, golly, boy, if I move that thing 50 foot that way, then I take all these naysayers out of it. And then, so then you're still in that back and forth scenario. You potentially have a path to
Right.
a resolution,
So that Shoshone, for example, is where we had a family with a severely disabled adult adult that where they were like, please, we love these things, they're great, we definitely need it, but can that be moved? And so we looked at that, and had we had that measure, there are some leeways in terms of it, right? Where we could move, but then if we moved it 50 feet down the road, Kevin, then we would re-put up those signs. And you still need to measure both ways and make sure that those people then right around it are saying, yes. If a street's got a problem, it's got a problem,
Yeah, well, I just, we call that in the phone business being in a do loop. You just keep going around
There
in a
comes a
circle.
point where you
And
do have to call it. We can obviously keep going out there and moving it.
yeah.
Right.
Okay. So what do you guys think, Kyle? What's on your mind?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I don't know if this wording is exactly where it wanted to be or not, but since we have in there suggested 200 feet before and after, I mean, I would take the word suggested out.
Okay.
I mean, if we're saying that, we need to say that, because then you get into, I guess, legalese about, well,
Yeah, that's fine.
that's one thing I was thinking, yeah.
Minimum perhaps,
What's that?
or minimum perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And, okay, I'll take minimum. Any other changes that you guys see?
In the area of concern, I mean, the way I'm reading it, you're talking about on that sentence, representing 60% of the households of the area of concern. You're talking about the area of that particular street,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
So is this something you guys feel like we ought to recommend to council for review?
I do.
Yeah, I do too. I think
Okay.
I think we gotta have something in place like she said to.
Okay,
And then, like I
so
said,
that's
we will
got-
ask them for council to
We-
endorse the policy.
yeah, you put that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so we got a motion to recommend it to council. Do we have
I
a
will
second?
second that.
We got a second. All those in favor say aye.
Is I.
Aye, opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, next then, traffic on Coolhurst. Miss Katie, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
All right, then last on our agenda is the added no parking on Woodridge.
Yeah, and this, and you may remember this, Brian, or somebody else. A gentleman called me that used to live there. His mother does, and he's moved back home and was familiar with the area. He said, turning onto Woodridge off of Keel, there used to be some no parking signs on that road. I don't know how many years ago he was talking about there, but anyway, there's not now. And he was concerned where there's a lot of parking on the side of the road there. And I've driven it, and he actually sent me a video beforehand too. It's wouldn't call it a steep hill, but it's an obstructed view for a good little ways there. And I can see the situation as far as there's when you're turning, if there's cars on the east side of the road there, and somebody coming the other way, it does create a problem there for a good little stretch. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, or if that's something to be taking a look at.
I'm not familiar with it. I'd have to take a look at it and probably get the police department to look at it and pay attention at night and see if it does look like it's a potential hazard. We could definitely
Yeah.
look at some sort of signage. It's just right after you turn off the hill.
Yeah, when I noticed when I drove that the hill is not just right there, it's probably, grades up for 5 or 6 houses there. But there were even this afternoon, quite a few cars parked there on the right. And then as I turned around and was coming out where I had the right of way, those cars were trying to weave in and out of cars and have to stop, to let me pass. So,
One thing is, once you put no parking signs up, nobody can park there.
right,
It doesn't matter if you've got a birthday party, if it's Thanksgiving, if it's Christmas, it's no parking.
right. And like I said, I don't know if they were there and taken down for a reason, I don't know.
I don't recall them being
Okay.
there, but it doesn't, I'm not saying that there wasn't there.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, just take a look and you can give us your best idea on that.
Okay. Any other business for this committee before we adjourn?
We were supposed to have them on there, and I swore they were on there. I was looking there a minute ago. and
What was that?
They're not on there. We discussed, I guess it's probably should have been under old business. Setting an ordinance that would set the speed limit to 25 miles per hour on, I think we said residential streets last week. That's why I put this Master Creek plan in there, and I guess it would probably be local streets to be more appropriate. And being that's how they're defined in the Master Creek plan, it could basically be any of the roads that are not colored purple, orange, or red, or green. But all of the other roads would be 25, the local streets would be 25 miles per hour.
So what about streets that are currently designated as 20?
My suggestion would be to change them to 25 where it was uniform as far as it would make it easier for the police department to. But that's just a suggestion. It would just designate all residential or local streets 25 miles per hour, and that's the way we mark them. And then if they're not marked, we already have an ordinance. It's anything that is not marked is 25 miles per hour. But, it would just also require, it would help with the argument of wanting, we get people all the time, want to lower the speed limit to 20 or take the 25 down. It's just, and I know Pete Hager said that it's confusing for a police officer a lot of times. Which street's 20 and which one's 25.
We got some of 30, some of 35.
Yeah.
So,
But if there was such an ordinance put before. Is that something y'all would take before council? I guess is what we're asking.
well, I mean, off the cuff, Brian, I certainly don't have any huge issues with that request. I guess I mean, there's just gonna be a street here and there that someone's gonna say, well, what about this one? And what about that one? And I mean, so I don't know, I don't know to what degree that would go to. So I'm kind of looking at the streets that are in orange right now, trying to.
All other streets will still be at the discretion of council, mayor, or city engineer. What's believed to be a safe speed on the minor arterials, collectors, principal arterial.
So what's the policy today? There
isn't a policy today.
as far as setting it,
What I generally tell people when they call me and the new subdivisions as they're coming in, and obviously we don't post a speed limit on the cul-de-sacs, a little short roads, but when they call and say, said I need a speed limit sign out here on Wooddale, and I want it to be 20 miles per hour. And I said, well, we don't put 20 miles per hour signs up anymore. Only thing I put up for years was 25s, but I don't have anything that really backs me up on that. That's.
so do we have anything that says, in the city of Sherwood city limits, unless otherwise posted, it's X?
No, we do have that. Ordinance 810 says it's 25 miles per hour unless otherwise posted.
Unless otherwise posted, okay. And that's
And even if it's not
1810?
posted, it's 28, ordinance 810.
810.
810. I'm almost certain of it.
So what do you guys think? Do you guys want to recommend that we send that to council in ordinance form, or you have more questions? What are you thinking?
I don't know. I don't have a problem with sending it to council, because each person, go ahead.
Only thing I would want clarified on that is, do we leave the streets that are currently 2020 or we change them to 25? And I personally think that they all need to go to 25, but I know that there'll be some pushback on that.
Well, that's what I was thinking. These, the council members, should be and will be more familiar with some of these. I don't travel all these roads all the time, and they're going to have a little bit more insight on some of that. But as far as sending it to them, to the council as a whole, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, I don't know anybody who travels 20 miles per hour. I
It's
don't.
not realistic.
I mean, my vehicle goes faster than that with no pressure on the gas pedal.
Yeah.
But so.
I would recommend.
Ross, you got any thoughts?
No, I think y'all pretty well covered it, and I think recommend it for the ordinance.
Okay. Can we put that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we send the proposed speed limit of residential street, local streets. Could be 25. I believe the way we worded 25 unless posted differently. Or to make them universally all 25. Not sure exactly how we worded that, Brian, but
25 for local road.
25 for local roads.
Yeah.
Local residential roads. Okay. That would be my motion.
Okay. So we've got a motion to have 25 miles per hour on local residential roads sent to council in ordinance form. We got a motion, we got a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, last thing I have, you guys were handed, this before the meeting. Not really gonna, spend any time on it today. Shoot, we've been here almost 2 hours. But would like for you guys to, you guys are both new to the committee, you know, look over really, the front page or the sidewalk request we've got in front of us, but the next 3 pages are the criteria and, information that was put together a couple, 2-3 years ago on, rating sidewalks, et cetera. We'll definitely want to, make sure, number one, we're all still good with that criteria. There's no tweaks need to be made, and then we'll want to be rating sidewalks. So we'll have that discussion hopefully at our next meeting in June. If there is no further business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We got a motion, we got a second. All those in favor disappear. Thank you. Appreciate you guys' time. And it wasn't on me today. Thank you, Mr. Landon. So, are you seeing someone about your